This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Brucham Abam to the Kollel Agad Perka here in Kew Garden Hills, New York. This is the final show before Purim, so we have good stuff this morning. Very possibly the most well-known pasuk of Megillas Esther is the pasuk, one of the four psukim of Geula that the whole Kehillah says together, La Yehudim, Hayisa, Ayra, V'simcha, V'sasayin, Bikar. And not only is it well known because it's one of the psukim that everybody says together, but it's also a pasuk that is, the minhag is to incorporate it into Havdalah. In fact, the Ramah in Siman Reish Tzadivav, Sifal, the Ramah writes, V'no'agu loimer koydem Havdalah, that you make in the house certain psukim, and one of the psukim that's mentioned in the Ramah is we say the pasuk, La Yehudim Haysa Ayra, and then we sort of add on a tefillah, Kain Tia Lanu. Now, so should be for us. In other words, for the Jews back in Shushan, they had light and happiness and joy, and we're mispalel, so we should have happiness, light, and joy. Now, the question is, why is this pasuk selected to incorporate in Havdalah? Certainly, it describes the great joy and happiness that Klal Yisrael experienced after the Yeshua of Purim. But nevertheless, there are many, many beautiful psukim in the Tanakh. Why specifically this pasuk? We could add, though, and ask, why would we be invoking the salvation of Purim Matzai Shabbos? We didn't just finish Purim, we finished Shabbos. It could be the 3 weeks, it could be the 9 days, it could be during the Yimei HaSfira, it could be any time of the year, and every Matzai Shabbos you're mentioning, La Yehudim Haysa Ayra V'simcha V'sams Meikar. Maybe it's relevant in the month before Purim, but why every single Matzai Shabbos do we invoke this in Havdalah, La Yehudim Haysa Ayra V'simcha V'sams Meikar? What's interesting is that this is not the only mention of Purim in Havdalah. And there are a lot of connections to Purim in Havdalah. So for example, and don't get upset at me, if you say you don't do this, okay, so then you could start doing it. And, I'm just reporting the facts over here. There's one of the minhagim, it's not a chiyuv, but it's a minhag. There is an ancient custom that as part of the besamim, to stick in the atzei hadas, to put in myrtles. It's actually mentioned in the Torah. V'noagu levarech al atzei hadas. The minhag is to make a bracha on the wood of a hadas. Why do we make the bracha on the wood of the hadas? What's the connection between hadas and Havdalah? Says the Torah, v'smach ledavar. The remez is that what? Kol shomer Shabbos mechalaloi. The Navi Yeshaya says, we laid it on a taina sivor. Kol shomer Shabbos mechalaloi. And right juxtaposed to that, v'samachle, tachas hasirpad yale hadas. In the place of the thorn rose the myrtle. So therefore, since hadassim are mentioned in connection to Shabbos, therefore as part of the procedure of making Havdalah, there is a minhag of putting the hadassim in the besamim. So you say, the Torah, that's just for Ashkenaz, maybe I'm a Sephardi. So the Beis Yosef also brings it down. The Beis Yosef also writes that the minhag is to be mevarech on a hadas, and he says the remez is tachas asirpad yala hadas, and it's juxtaposed to shomer Shabbos me chalalai. Okay, but if you remember, Rabbi Say, this pasuk of v'sachas hasirpad yala hadas, the Gemara says that the hadas in this pasuk is specifically referring to Esther, right? We mentioned Vayhi oimein Es Hadassah. So Esther's name is Hadassah. Right? I think we mentioned that how many times is Haman in the Megillah? 54. How many times is Esther in the Megillah? 54. You have one Memuchan and you have one Hadassah. So the Gemara even darshans. It's interesting, the Gemara when the Gemara begins the Agadata portion of Masechta Megillah, the Gemara says that many of the Amoraim, when they would begin discussing the Purim story, their vantage point would be, they would come up with like a pasuk in Tanakh that was connected to Megillah Esther, and that was their introduction to the Purim story. Nowadays rabbis like to begin with a joke. The problem is, rabbis don't realize that if they're serious, then the jokes don't go over well. People don't laugh. And the worst thing a rabbi could do is say a bad joke. I mean, it's a disaster. Rabbi says a bad joke, forget the joke. Get straight to the Divrei Torah then. If you can't deliver the joke, then just skip the whole. So back then they were smart. They just started with the Divrei Torah right away. And the Gemara says, this Amora Pasach la Pischa lahai Parsha mehacha. And the Gemara says, Rav Shimon bar Nachmani, he would begin darshaning on the Megillah from here, and he would begin Tachas Hanatzot Yale Beroish. In the place of the thistle arose a cypress. Besachas Hasirpad Yale Hadas. And the Gemara darshans, Rav Shimon bar Nachmani darshans. Tachas Hanatzot is Tachas Haman Harasha, who made himself an Avodah Zarah. Instead of him arose the Beroish, is Mordechai. Mordechai is called what? Roish L'chol HaBesamim. So now we're learning that what's Mordechai called? Mordechai is called the choicest besamim. How do I know? Because it says in Kisisa, V'yata kach lecha besamim roish mar derar, and the Targum says what's mar derar? Mardachya. It's Mordechai. So Mordechai is considered the choicest besamim. Sachas hasirpad is in the place of Vashti, who is the granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar, who burned the Beis Hamikdash, which is called Refidas Beis Hashem, Refidasai Zahav, and instead of her arose Hadas is Esther. So it's very interesting. The Minhag Matzoi Shabbos is then the procedure of Havdalah. We take a Hadas, that's darshan from the pasuk Sachas Hasirpad Yala Hadas, and the Gemara says the Hadas refers to Esther. So it's like all of a sudden every Matzah Shabbos we're reliving the Purim story. We pull out the Hadas, the Besamim is Mordechai. By the way, it's very interesting. The Chassam Sofer tries to explain, what's the connection between Purim and Havdalah. So the Gemara says in the Gemara Megillah, Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis, the Gemara says on the pasuk, it says, "Bayom Hashvi," on the seventh day, Ketoiv Lev HaMelech Bayayin, when the king's heart was full with wine, was good with wine. So it says, Amar Lemhuma Bizach Arvana Biksa Vavaksa. So Gemara asks, what do you mean on the seventh day his heart was good with wine? But until then, he's drinking 187 days. His heart wasn't satisfied on day 147. What happened on day 7 that his heart was dafka good? On that day, the Gemara says on Megillah Yud Beis Amud Beis, Atu ad hashta loy tavli be b'chamra. So Gemara says, Amar Rava Yom Hashvi Shabbos haya. That day was Shabbos. Now, what do Jews do on Shabbos? Jews on Shabbos, they eat, they drink, and what do Jews do when they eat and drink? They speak Divrei Torah. And Goyim, when they eat and drink, they start talking about lewd matters, promiscuous matters, and that's what happened. V'kachava, at the Suda of Achashveirosh, they got into a whole debate, which Nashim are the most beautiful, and these said it's the Madios, and these said it's the Persians. So Achashveirosh says, do me a favor. My wife, he says a very corrosive, very coarse language. He said the Kli that I use, she's not Persian, she's not Kazdi, she's not Madi, she is neither of the above. You want to take a look at her? She's more beautiful than anyone. And they said, yeah, let's take a look, but under our conditions, right? And you know the story. And then the Gemara says like this, that Mida keneged Mida, with the Mida that a person dishes out, they measure out to him. So the Gemara says, by the way, just as an aside, there seems to be in this Gemara non sequitur. Because the Gemara is trying to get to the point where what happened on that day that Achashveirosh all of a sudden was full with wine, and the Gemara is getting to the point that a whole debate broke out, who's the most beautiful, until Achashveirosh says, my wife's the most beautiful, and that's how Vashti that's how the subject of bringing Vashti out was brought to the forefront. But the Gemara seems to say like a random idea that what do Jews do when they eat and drink? Jews speak Divrei Torah. Okay, shkoyach. Good to know. What's that have to do with the topic at hand? Here we're talking about a subject here. We want to know, how did it come about that Achashveirosh wanted Vashti to parade herself? So what's the Gemara saying? By the way, do you know what Jews do when they eat and drink? They speak Divrei Torah. Oh yeah, okay. And what do Jews do when they sleep? And what do Jews do it's a random idea. It has nothing to do with the point at hand. Why is the Gemara giving a plug to the Jews, what the Jews do when they eat?
They would participate
participating in the Suda with Achashveirosh.
Yeah, but
they weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing, saying the declared.
so the Ben Yoyada says like this. Ben Yoyada says it's Mamash Apella. We know why did the Jews? The Gemara says when they ma Sunni Yisrael neschayvu kloya, when they ma Sunni Yisrael shabaoisa adar neschayvu kloya, because they were nene from the Suda of Achashveirosh. So it's a Mamash Apella. So think about it. They were nene from the Suda of Achashveirosh, but at that very moment that they were nene from the Suda of Achashveirosh, Vashti is being invited to parade herself, and she was killed by Achashveirosh, and that began the salvation. So you're telling me that at the moment the Jews were chayiv kloya and they were getting the Rebbeinu Shalom angry, that brought about the Yeshua? It doesn't make any sense. So says the Ben Yoyada, this Gemara is addressing that question. Because even though there were some Jews who were nene from the Suda, but there were a handful of Jews who were doing what Yidden do at a meal. You know what they were doing? They were speaking Divrei Torah. And in the Zechus of the Divrei Torah that these Jews spoke, that brought about the salvation of Purim. In other words, says the Ben Yoyada, what saved the Jewish people in times of Purim? The Divrei Torah that Jews said over at the Shabbos table. Sometimes you say, okay, I say it's a 2-minute Dvar Torah. What's the nafkamina? I'm sitting there for 2 hours. Nafkamina, I say the Dvar Torah. I don't say the Dvar Torah, says Ben Yoda. Yeah, the entire salvation of Purim took place because of the Divrei Torah that the Yidden spoke at the time of the Sudas Purim. Okay. So the Gemara says that why did Vashti deserve this very embarrassing fate that she had to parade herself in a very unbecoming way in front of all the officials of Persia media, says the Gemara, Mida Keneged Mida. Why? Because Vashti used to bring the Bnei Yisrael, and umafshita narumais, she would strip them, and she would make them do malacha on Shabbos. So therefore, Mida Keneged Mida, Achashveirosh had Vashti parade herself in such a state. When? Bayoim Ashvi on Shabbos. Mida Keneged Mida. Yeah? So we know that story. So Vashti used to make the Jewish women work in this unbecoming way on Shabbos, so she had to parade herself in this way on Shabbos as well. So says the Chassam Sofer very interestingly. Therefore, if we went through a Shabbos, and we were Zoicha to keep a Shabbos, and we remember we are Zoicha to keep Shabbos, but back in the day, we once had a tyrant, we once had a Machashefa like Vashti, who did not let women keep Shabbos, did not let Klal Yisrael keep Shabbos, was mevaza us on Shabbos. So if on a Motzoi Shabbos it comes, and we were zoichet to keep the Shabbos, and we had a respectable Shabbos, that's the proper time to remember the miracle of Purim. That think about what the Rebbeinu Shalom gave you. If you had the zchus to keep a Shabbos, appreciate the Purim story that the Rebbeinu Shalom saved us from a tyrant like Vashti. That in those days they weren't able to keep a Shabbos, but nowadays we are able to. So every Motzei Shabbos, by Yehudim, Hoysa, Oira, V'simcha, V'sasa, Mikar, and we put the Hadas in the Besamim, and we have the Besamim, which is a remez to Mordechai. Okay, Azoy Zok the Chassam Sofer. We would like to perhaps offer, add on, and perhaps deepen our understanding exactly what is the connection every Motzei Shabbos that we invoke the story of Purim, that we invoke the Hadas of Esther, that we invoke Mordechai the Besamim, that we mention the pasuk La Yehudim Hoysa Oira V'simcha V'sasayin V'ikar. Mar Rabbi said there's another detail of Besamim, of Havdalah, which is connected to Purim, and that is that we know that Motzoi Shabbos you need a flame, you need a fire, yeah? But l'chadchila, it's supposed to be an avuka, it's supposed to be a torch, which means, what does a torch mean? A minimum of 2 wicks. So the Shulchan Aruch and Siman Reish Tzadichas, mitzvah mina muvchar levarech al avuka. It's a choice mitzvah to make havdalah on a torch. Okay, says Rama, what is considered a torch? A wick, a candle that has 2 wicks is considered a torch. Well, says the Chassam Sofer, very interestingly, the Medrash in Bereshis Rabbah refers to Golos Bavel and Golos Madai as darkness. Says the Medrash in Bereshis Rabbah, V'hi ema chashecha gedoyla noifeles olav. Says the Bereshis Rabbah, Ema is Bavel, Chashecha is Madai. They darkened our eyes. It was a very dark time. It was a very bleak time. And there's another medrash, there's a medrash Shachar Tov, that says that Esther and Mordechai are compared to our light. The pasuk Hiata Toyer Neri b'Mordechai Elokai Yagia Cheshki beEsther. So says the Chassam Sofer, look what the Medrash is comparing Mordechai and Esther to two candles. Why? Because since Galus Madai is darkness and Eimachashecha is Bavel, therefore the heroes of the Purim story are analogous to two wicks. But listen to the lashon of the Chassam Sofer. Says the Chassam Sofer, Umashal de Mordechai veEsther lama d'hudaima. What is the analogy of Mordechai and Esther? What would you compare Mordechai and Esther to? Lishtei neiros, two candles, two wicks. Very interesting expression. So this is another connection to Purim. So you have the Besamim, which is Mordechai. You have the Hadas, which is Esther. You have the La Yehudim Haisa Ora V'Simcha V'Sasam Hikar. And finally, the two wicks of the candle are a remez to Mordechai and Esther. Well, some have a custom, Rabbi say, that when they say the pasuk La Yehudim Haisa Ora, what do? Some lift up the candle. I don't. But some people do. It's not brought down in Shulchan Aruch. Why? Why would you lift up the candle? Well, according to what we're saying, maybe what the remez is since the candle is representative of Mordechai and Esther, and you're reciting the pasuk La Yehudim Haisa Vikar, so you sort of combine the two together, you mashaliv the two ideas together, and as you say the pasuk La Yehudim Haisa you lift up the candle. But what we have here are three connections between Havdalah and Purim. Number one, the pasuk La Yehudim Haisa. Number two, you have the Hadassim. We mentioned Mordechai is the Rosh Besamim. And then finally, you have the two wicks. The two wicks represent Mordechai and Esther. And again, the question is, why every Matzoi Shabbos, and especially this year, where sort of the kickoff of Purim is with Havdalah? Purim doesn't begin. Havdalah ushers in Purim. What is the connection between the Purim story and the ritual of Havdalah? So let me tell you a very important Gemara. This is a critical Gemara. The Gemara Megillah on Daf Hey Amud Beis points out. You have a Chumash?
I did.
Right over here. In Parak Tes of Megillah Esther, you have a mamish astira. You have a contradiction between two psukim. So, see if we could find it. Okay. Alkein hayudim aprazim hayoshivim yarei aprazis oisim es yoim arba asar l'chodesh adar. Listen carefully. Simcha u'mishteh v'yayim tov u'mishleach manois ishreyu. So here, Simcha, Mishteh, Yom Tov, Mishleach manois. And then you go down a few psukim. La soy sam yemei mishteh v'simcha mishleach manois ishreyu matanois v'hav yoinim. Mar Rabbi say, what happened to the Yom Tov? What happened to the Yom Tov? Now, Rabbi say, is Purim a Yom Tov?
No.
Nope. It's not a Yom Tov. You're allowed to do malacha on Purim. Yeah, the Gemara says, Ein roya simin bracha. Okay, but there's no Isser malacha on Purim. It's not a Yom Tov. So the Gemara wants to know what happened. Why in the beginning does it say, Simcha mishta v'Yom Tov, u'mishlayach manois, and then at the end it doesn't say Yom Tov. Says the Gemara Megillah, this is what happened. Mordechai got up, they had a big asifa, and Mordechai said, we're going to make a day of simcha, and everyone said, yeah, everyone says, this is our kind of gadol, we like this rabbi, and then he said, let's make it a day of mishta, and everyone's cheering, go Mordechai, put him on the Mayatzis Torah, and then he said, Yom Tov, and he said, that's not our rabbi, not our rabbi. They were makabel Yom Tov. They weren't makabel Yom Tov. Klal Yisrael were not makabel it as Yom Tov. The Gemara says, Hesped v'tainis kabilu alayu, malacha loy kabilu alayu. D'mei ikar ksiv simcha u'mishteh v'yam tov, u'levasoiv ksiv Lasois oisam yemei mishta v'simcha v'ilu yamtav loiksev. Why in the world were Klal Yisrael not makabel Yom Tov? If you ever hear you tell a Jew, you don't have to go to work. He said, no, I want to go to work. One thing we like Yom Tov. The more Yom Tovim, the better. Why were Klal Yisrael here? Mordechai is making a Yom Tov. They don't like a Yom Tov. What's the problem? Why couldn't they be makabel as a Yom Tov? By the way, interesting. We're talking about the connection between the Megillah and Shabbos. So we have the pasuk Vayom Hashvi Ketoiv Lev Hamelech Vayoyin. So everybody's familiar that Chazal tell us when it says Hamelech in the Megillah Stam, not Hamelech Achashveirosh, it's referring to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Vayom Hashvi, on the seventh day on Shabbos, when the heart of the king, who's the king? Ein Melech Ela Malkoi Shalom. He was good with wine. What's the wine? It's Kiddush. The Rebbeinu Shalom. It was Toiv Lev because Klal Yisrael were making Kiddush on the Yayin. By the way, it's interesting. The Gemara Megillah says that Esther had how many maid servants? How many girls that worked for her? That Esther used these girls to count the days of Shabbos. Yeah? Esther counted the days of the week through her girls. Now, I don't know about you, but, it's really not rocket science to count the days of the week. Why would she need to count the days of the week with, when Sprinza came, it was this day, and when Yentala came, it was that day. What's going on? Achashveirosh did not supply her with an executive calendar. You want to know the days of the month. Okay, February is a little confusing. Nobody ever knows what day it is. All of a sudden, you start February and then it's March already. You don't know what happened. But these are days of the week. Well, what's the difficulty that Esther had? You would think she's a smart lady. She's one of the Shiva Nevios. She didn't know what day of the week it was. So, Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, yeah? Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, in the Yaros Devash, says a very interesting thing. We know, of course, Esther as a queen, but nevertheless, she was Moser Nefesh to keep Shabbos. But she obviously wouldn't want anyone to know that she's a Shomer Shabbos, because she didn't even tell Achashveirosh she was Jewish. So she had a problem. If she's going to work 6 days a week and rest on the seventh day, word's going to get out that she's a Jewish woman. So what's she going to do? Not work at all? No, can't be, says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz. Every human being has to go to work. Has to work. Or has to be busy. The Gemara says, Habatola mavia lidei shiamum. What does that mean? If you don't have anything to do, it brings to insanity. It brings to illness. A person has to be busy. A person who's not busy, it's not a good thing. People think, work is so stressful. I can't wait until I go on vacation. And then they realize when they go on vacation, they have more stress and anxiety than any other time. Why? Because at least when they're busy, their mind is occupied. But when they're not busy, then the mind is worried and thinking about this and thinking about that. Anytime a person is worried about something, the best medication is busy yourself. Do something. Find something to keep yourself occupied. Men and women, says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz. The Gemara says that even if somebody's husband is a multi-billionaire, they still got to keep busy. Otherwise, batala, mavia, lidei, shiamam. Doing nothing, idleness brings to bad things. So what's Esther going to do? She can't not work, ever, because then she's going to go meshuggah. She can't work 6 days and rest on Shabbos, because then it's going to be clear that she's a Shomer Shabbos. So she had an ingenious solution. She's going to have 7 different maidservants. So Yentala comes on Sunday, and Yentala knows that every Sunday Esther works, so Yentala says she must work every day of the week. And when Sprinza comes on Monday, and Sprinza sees Esther working, Sprinza says she works 7 days a week. But on the 7th day, when Shendel comes on the 7th day, and she sees Esther's not working, Shendel says, this woman is a queen, she never works. That's what it means she counted the day of the week by her maidservants. In other words, she had to get a separate girl for every day. This way no one was ever in on the plan that she worked 6 days and she rested on Sunday. Okay, that's just, an aside point. What?
The menu also.
The menu?
Right. Shabbos is the Shabbos shift.
I mean, the fact that she had chulent, she thought she had chulent all day. She was very haimish. Wednesday already you start with the chulent, and then Thursday night, and Friday you got a taste of chulent, and Motzei Shabbos, you have leftovers, and Sunday already. Yeah, okay. Okay, Mara Rabbi said, but now we come to the main subject, the subject that's on everybody's minds. And really, this is something that's been weighing on my heart, and I don't know what to do. And that is Vashti's tale. Obviously, the most important part of the Purim story is Vashti's tale. And exactly how it looked, did she wag her tail? Did it come out? What happened with Vashti's tale? And the Gemara says, because the question is when Achashveirosh wanted Vashti to come parade herself, so she should have jumped at the opportunity. I mean, this is what she's waiting for her whole life. She's a prutza. I mean, she's been counting down the days to such an opportunity. Why didn't she accept the offer? So the Gemara says in Megillah, Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis, the Gemara says, Vatimoin hamalka Vashti. Vatimoin hamalka Vashti. She refused. Why? Frek, the Gemara, Michti, Pritza Savai. She's a prutza. Both of them, when they made the party, their intention was to do Nabira. My time aloy asoi. Why didn't she come? Says the Gemara, Tana ba Gavriel v'asala zanov. The central theme of Purim, Vashti grew a tail. That's why she didn't come. And as big of a prutza as she was, with the tail, there's not much you could do. Okay. Everybody knows that story. This is like the best part of the Purim story. Right? Vashti grew a tail. The only thing was, I learned something about Vashti's tail, which was demoralizing. It's devastating. Because if you look in the Gemara, on Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis, the Gemara says that Achashveirosh didn't know what to do. Because Achashveirosh, his wife is not listening to him, and it's embarrassing. Who wears the pants in the house? So Achashveirosh asked the Yoidei Ho'itim, he asked the Rabbanim, who knew how to be Ma'aber the Shanim, and he said, look at number 20, Amar Lahu, second line, Dainu, judge the case for me. And the rabbis had this great dilemma. What should we do? If we're going to judge her, tomorrow he's going to cool off, and he's going to blame us for knocking off his wife. Elamai, we should let her off the hook, but it's a bizayon to the malchus. So they were very smart rabbis. What should a rabbi do? Someone asks you a difficult question and you don't know the answer. What do? You know what? That's a very good question. You should ask Rabbi so-and-so. That's always the correct response. If someone asks you a question you don't know, don't make up the answer. You're going to get in trouble. Say you don't know. Why don't you ask a different rabbi? Let him get in trouble. Okay. So that's what they did. They said, go ask Amoin Emayav. Go ask Ammon. But listen to the Lashon of the Gemara. The Gemara says, Amrulai miyayim shachar beis hamikdash. From the day the temple was destroyed, v'galin me'atzenu nidla eitza mimenu ve'inonu yoidim ladan dinei nefashos. We cannot dan dinei nefashos. Zil legabe Ammon Emayav. Why don't you go to Ammon Emayav? Why Ammon Emayav? The Yasi b'duchtayu. Ammon Emayav, they've been in their place for the longest time. Meaning Ammon and Moav were never exiled. They're sitting on their place like wine that sits in their sediment. The time, in other words, they were able to develop such reason and logic and rationale and being able to understand things. Like the pasuk says, Shanan Moav Minaurav V'shoiketu al Shmarav. They were never poured out. We are tormented. We Jews, we're running from exile to exile. We don't have Menuchas HaNefesh to give you an answer. Go to Ammon and Moav. What's the deeper meaning here? Why were the Chachamim sending Achashveirosh to Ammon and Moav? Why didn't he say, you know what, go ask North Korea, there's a guy over there, he thinks he knows what he's doing, right? Why don't you go why Dafka Ammon and Moav? Says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, the Chachamim were insinuating a very important response to Achashveirosh. Everybody knows that we're not allowed to marry an Ammoni and a Moavi. Why? Because when we were leaving Mitzrayim, we were hungry, they didn't have hospitality, they didn't serve us food. And yet, we were allowed to marry the women from Ammon and Moav. Why? So Doig Ha'adomi asked, the same way you can't marry the men, you shouldn't be allowed to marry the women. The women should have brought us food. And the Gemara answers, no, it's not modest, it's not snios for women to come out and serve food to men. So Doig Ha'adomi asked, let the men bring food to the men, and the women bring food to the women. And they didn't know the answer, right? The Gemara says here that David's defenders did not know, Yoav didn't know the answer. And the Gemara says that he should have responded, no, it's not snios for women to go out publicly and bring food to other women. Why? Kol kevuda bas melech penima. That the success of a woman is in a more modest sphere. Even in the public limelight, even among women, a woman's success is not found in a public spectacle. In fact, the Gemara says that when Sancheriv came to exile the Umayis Ha'olam, he did not exile Ammon and Moav. Why? Because when Bilam wanted the Benois Moav and Ammon to be mezana with Klal Yisrael, Ammon and Moav said no thank you. And therefore they were zoicha that they were never exiled. So what the Chachamim were telling Achashveirosh was, this is not a good idea to bring Vashti out. Go to Ammon and Moav. Look at them. Look at their success. Look at the fact that they were never exiled. Why were they never exiled? Because of the midah of tznios, because of the midah of modesty. So you should be very careful before you tell your wife. If you want to live you want to have a long, happy marriage with your wife, this is not a good idea to have her parade herself. Look at the merit of tznios. That's what the Chachamim were insinuating when they said Zil Lagabe Ammon and Moav. And then Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshit says something that to me is just devastating. You know what it means that Gabriel came and he made a tale on Vashti? It doesn't really mean he made a tale. Let me explain something to you. You know, there's a machlokes in the Gemara. What did the original man look like? We know at first there was no woman. So there's machlokes. One man, the Amar, says there were two faces. One looking this way, one looking that way. Right? So the man and the husband and wife, they never saw each other. Shalom Bayis, we don't hear any problems at that stage, right? One was looking to the right, the other one looking to the left. The other man, the Amar, there was a person and a tail. Right? Remember the Gemara Brachos? Chad Amar Partzov, the Chad Amar Zanav. Interesting. Now the Medrash says, why was Chava created from the Tzela? Says the Medrash, just like the rib is covered and hidden, so too a woman needs to be modest. Says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, that's only if a woman was created from the rib. But if she was created face against face, then a woman would not have to have Yatsanua. This is going according to the Shita that she was created from the rib. Says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, in other words, when the Gemara calls where a woman was created tail, that's another way of saying rib. Tail is a code word for rib. So therefore, says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, you know what it means that Gabriel made Vashti a tail? It doesn't mean literally Vashti was a cow. She turned into a para. She had a tail sticking out of her. It means he elicited in her the midah of tail. What does tail mean? In Chazal, tail is a code word for the rib, meaning she engendered in Vashti feelings of tznios, and therefore Vashti didn't want to come out. It doesn't really mean that Vashti grew a tail. Vashti didn't grow a tail. I mean, come on. Yeah, you really think she was, headed to Achashveirosh and then pop out, this long tail came popping out of her? No. It's allegorical. Zanav means the midah of Zanav. The woman was created from the Zanav. That means she was created from the rib. It's a way of saying he engendered in her the midah of modesty. And this is like a dagger in the heart. You know why? Vashti didn't have a tail? Oy vey. I mean, my whole life, I always grew up. Vashti had a tail. That's like the best part of the Purim story. And now Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz is saying that Vashti didn't really have a tail. Oy vey. This is terrible, right? Rabbi, you're gonna let this fly? That Vashti didn't have a tail? I don't know. So I believe it's mitzvah liyashvai. How could we answer? It's the week before Purim. You can go into a Purim and imagine you came home and you told your kids, you could tell your grandkids, Vashti didn't really have a tail. So they're going to think you're apikoros. It might disturb shalom bayis. This is going to be bad things. So I think it's a very big mitzvah. We're here together. We have to try to explain how possibly, even according to Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, Vashti did have a tail. So we're going to name the shiur, the tail of Vashti's tail. Okay?
Tail of the tail.
So, Rabbi Glatstein, another question you want to address. Look, it's right before Purim. We have to answer some serious questions here. What happened to Achashveirosh? It doesn't say. All we know at the end of the Megillah is he charged taxes.
He became poor.
Like, where did he go? What happened after the Megillah? Where did he go? Who was he? Where did he go? Where did he go on vacation? He retired? That's the end of him? He went to Florida. He went to Disneyland. That's it. There's an amazing psikta. Rabbi Sai, this is going to completely revolutionize the Purim story. Now, at first, it wouldn't seem to have anything to do with Purim. Says the Psikta Rabbasi, Amru Rabbi Steina, Masa Haya B'Yisrael Echad. There was a story about a Jew, Shahaya Loi Para Achas Chayrashas. There's a Jew, he had a cow. It doesn't mean he had a cow, he owned a cow, okay? He owned a cow. Nisma Toyadai, he became poor, Umachar Loi Lagay Echad. And he sold it. Kivan shalakcha hagai. Once the guy bought it, v'charsha ima sheishas yamim shachal. He worked the cow 6 days. B'Shabbos hoitziu shatach rimai. He wanted to work the cow on Shabbos. And what happened? V'rav tzolai tachas ha'oil. And the cow just crouched down. The cow said, "I ain't working on Shabbos." Right? Ain't gonna work on Saturday. The cow said. And the owner beat the cow. The cow didn't move. So the guy goes back to the Jew and says, I bought a cow that's going to work 7 days a week. What kind of crazy cow do you have? This cow doesn't, it's a frumma cow. I heard of cows, but this cow doesn't work on Shabbos. Oh, the Jew said, let me just have a moment with my cow. So the Jew, the Yidla, bends down, he lifts up the ear of the cow, he says, do me a favor, Elsie. I know that you used to have a day off on Shabbos, but times change, and now you're working for the guy, and now you got to work on Shabbos. I understand, but Nebuch, because of Ba'amanasenu Harabim, I can't keep you anymore. You got to start working on Shabbos. And sure enough, the cow started working on Shabbos. The guy became so overwhelmed. He said, "What are you, a kishuf macher? What do you do to the cow?" So he said, "No, don't worry. The guy said, I don't want this cow. This is a crazy cow." So the Jew was forced to reveal to the guy that, look, while he worked for me, I'm a Shomer Shabbos, see the cow didn't work. But now that he's working for me, I just wanted him to know that he could start working again. Says the Medrash, the guy was so overwhelmed and this guy was so moved that he was Megayer. Not the cow, the guy. The guy was Megayer. V'limed v'zacha l'Torah. He learned and he was Zoicha to Torah. V'hayukayrim Shemai Yochanan ben Tairasa. They called him Yochanan, the son of a cow. V'ad achshav Rabbi Seinu Oimrim halacha mishmai. And until today, people still say over Torah from Yochanan ben Tairasa. Now mamish, this is a Kirov success story. Right? How? Who is Makarav Yochanan? A cow. Shabbos inspired. This we should highlight this. Of all the famous Kirov stories, this got to be the best. You could have a big picture of a cow and say, "Guess what this cow did?" Even you should advertise. You don't think you could do Kirov? Even you could do Kirov. You have a big picture of a cow. If he could do it, you could do it. And the Gemara and the Medrash says, if you don't think a cow could bring you closer to Hashem, just look at a parah aduma. That's the end of the Medrash. Something to myself, Yochanan ben Tairasa, he's not your everyday Tana. Do you remember ever hearing halachas in Shas from Yochanan ben Tairasa? So I immediately scanned and went through and searched Torah Shabbal Peh. Do we have any halachas and statements and ma'amorim from Yochanan ben Tairasa? And yes, there are 3 ma'amorim and Shas from Yochanan ben Tairasa. Again, this man was a guy, and who converted him? A cow. So the Seder Hadoros, or Bichil Halpern, says yes, there's a Gemara in Yuma on Daf Tes, and there's a Medrash in Shemais Rabbah, Parsha Mem, and also there's another Medrash in Eicha Rabbah. I want to share them with you. Okay, so look at number 24. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Tairasa, Mibnei Ma'charva Shilai. Why was Mishkan Shilai destroyed? We know there was a Mishkan in Shilai, something like 370 years, 369 years. Why was Shilai destroyed? Mipnei shahayu ba shnei dvarim. There were two chataim. Giloi arayos, ubizayin kachim. Illicit relations and disgracing kachim. By the way, doesn't this sound like Achashveirosh's party? I mean, what were the two sins at Achashveirosh's party? There's Gilui Arayos going on. He ordered Vashti to parade herself, and he took out V'kelim. He took out his Mavaza Kachim. By the way, the Tosfos Yeshanim says, who's Rabbi Yochanan ben Tairasa? He read the psik that says, Shinaskari de Para. He's the guy who got converted through the cow. That's halacha number 1 taught by Rabbi Yochanan ben Tairasa. Another memra. Okay, I'm going to reveal to you some very, personal information. You go to a simcha, and a guy gets up there, and he says, I'm not really prepared. I'm thinking to myself, the guy's not prepared. So what's he getting? What do I have to waste my bittel's man? I have to hear this guy now if he didn't prepare. Why didn't he prepare? If he didn't prepare, don't get up and talk. What are you wasting my time for? Then he starts saying, well, I was thinking of saying X, Y, and Z, but I decided, it's bad enough to hear what you're going to say, and I have to hear what you're thinking of saying. I'm not really a speaker, so good, so don't speak. What are you wasting my time for? People don't realize that if you get up to speak in public, it's a responsibility. You can't waste people's time. You got to prepare. Otherwise, you're not, one thing you're having a conversation with one person, but you're getting up to speak barabim, there's a halachic obligation to prepare a certain number of times. You know how many times? 4 times. Where do we learn this from? The Rebbeinu Shalom, that before the Rebbeinu Shalom says anything to Moshe Rabbeinu, he chazer zibur 4 times. Gemara says, look at number 25. It's a medrash in Shemais Rabbah, Parsha Mem, Ois Aleph, Davar Acher, Ozra, Vayesapra, Amri Rabbanan, Sorech Adam Liois Noitel Mashal Loimar Pirkoi Ayagadasai Amidrasha Bishash Mavak Amr Tzibur. A person must prepare what he's going to say. Otherwise he's going to be let me just get this. In the meantime, you're wasting everybody's time. Lo yomer, don't say Ho Shani Yodeh B'Yav Yishanas Lidur Shani Yomer. Don't say I already know it. I already taught this subject, so I don't have to prepare it. Where do we learn this from? Amar Rav Acha Minhu Aleikim Atalami. You learn it from God. When He came to teach the Torah, He taught it, He chazered it, He said it over 4 times. Shenemar Oz Ra Vayisapra Hechina V'Gam Chakara. Amri Rabbanon. The Rabbanon said, Rabbi Yochanan ben Tairasa Pamachas Volifnei Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yochanan ben Tairasa, one time he came before Rabbi Akiva. Amar Loi, Rabbi Akiva said, no, you have something good to say over. Rabbi Yochanan ben Tairasa, sorry, I didn't prepare it 4 times, so he did not speak. And the rabbis praised him. To quote Mark Twain, better to keep your mouth closed and be thought of as a fool than to open it and have all doubts removed. Okay? So if you don't have something smart to say, don't say it. But Shlomo Melech says even better. Gam evil macharish, chacham yechashev. That if you're a fool and you keep your mouth closed, people think you're smart. See, Mark Twain only said people won't think you're crazy. No, Shlomo said that even better. People actually think you know something. Okay. Once you open up your mouth, people realize. Okay. So that's the second thing that Yochanan ben Tairasa says. So number 1, he explained why Mishkan Shiloh was destroyed. Number 2, he said that before you give a shiur, you have to prepare 4 times. Number 3, there was a possible candidate for Mashiach. His name was Bar Koichva or Bar Koiziva. And you know what? A lot of people believed in him, including the great Rabbi Akiva. The Medrash says in Echarabba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rebbe Hayadorish Darach Koichav Miyakov, Al Tikri Koichav Ela Koizav. Rabbi Akiva can have a Chomile Lahadin Bar Koiziva. Rabbi Akiva, when he saw Bar Koichva, have a Amar, Hainu Malka Mashiach. That is the Messiah. Amar Loi Rabbi Yochanan ben Tairasa. Rabbi Yochanan ben Tairasa said, Akiva, grass will grow in your mouth before this guy's Mashiach. No, this is not Purim Torah. This is real.
It's a real Torah.
Three things that Rabbi Yochanan ben Tairasa said. What are the three things Rabbi Yochanan ben Tairasa said? Number one, Rabbi Yochanan ben Tairasa said that Mishkan Shiur was destroyed because of Bizayin Kodshim and Gilei Arayos. Number two, Rabbi Yochanan ben Tairasa said before you give Shiur, you got to prepare what you're going to say. Number three, Rabbi Yochanan ben Tairasa said Rabbi Akiva is not Mashiach. Comes Ramami Pano. We know Ramami Pano is one of the great Italian Mekubalim. He first was a student of the writings of the Ramak, Rav Moshe Cordovero, but later on he actually learned from the Kabbalah of the system of the Arizal from Rabbi Yisrael Saruk. We were zochet to be at his kever in the summer. Says the Ramami Pano, a davar nifla. What happened to Vashti? You know what happened to Vashti? Vashti turned into the cow. Which cow? Vashti turned into the cow that didn't work on Shabbos. Why? Mida keneged mida. Vashti made the Jewish women, she was mafshit them aruma, and she made them work on Shabbos. Hashem said, no problem, we'll be mafshit you aruma. Cows don't really have too many begadim. And you're not going to work on Shabbos. Mida keneged mida. And Baruch Hashem, I was so grateful to Rabbi Hashem, because now, in fact, Vashti did have a tail.
Yeah.
Vashti did have a tail, but not the tail that you thought. It's a different tail. Vashti had a real tail, a cow tail. Vashti was the para that didn't work on Shabbos. Mor Rabbi says Ramami Pano. And who is that guy who was so inspired by this cow and converted and became the Tana Yochanan ben Tairasa? That was the Tana, that was Achashveirosh. Achashveirosh was the reincarnate. Rabbi Yochanan ben Tairasa was the Gilgal of Achashveirosh. So it dawned on me, that is why Rabbi Yochanan ben Tairasa says 3 Ma'amorim in Shas. Because after all, if he's Achashveirosh, and the Ramami Pano says that Achashveirosh had a tikkun through the Tana Rabbi Yochanan ben Tairasa. So let's try to understand, what are the 3 big blunders of Achashveirosh, and how is he masaking them? Well, blunder number 1 is his party. And at his party, what were the 2 Averos? Gilei Arayos and Bizayin Kodshim. So in order to be masaking that, Rabbi Yochanan ben Tairasa gets up in the Beis Medrash and he says, Mibnei ma nechrav shiloi mibnei bizayin kodshim Gilei Arayos. So he's masaking his party of Gilei Arayos and bizayin kodshim. What's the other big blunder of Achashveirosh? The Gemara says he's a melech hafachfach. The guy can't make up his mind. This day he says this way, that day he says the next way, this story, that story. He can never get the story straight. So comes the Tana of Yochanan ben Tairasa. Before you give a shir, you better get your story straight. You have to chazer it again and again and again and again until you have the Maisa straight. If you don't have the Maisa straight, don't say anything. Otherwise you're going to be like my predecessor, Achashveirosh, who's a melech hafachfach. But there was one major blunder Achashveirosh made. And that is, what was he celebrating in this party? He was celebrating the fact that the Ribbon Shalom promised that the Geula would come after 70 years. And Achashveirosh says, no, I counted 70 years and the Geula didn't come. Meaning, he wrongfully put burst the bubble of messianic hope. He wrongfully told people that the Geula is not coming. So in order to be masaking that, he's the one who comes to Rabbi Akiva to rightfully tell Rabbi Akiva, sorry, this time Mashiach is not coming. He's not the salvation, he's not the Mashiach. Rabbi Yochanan ben Tairasa pinpoints and removes every kilkul of Achashveirosh. Why? So says the Ramami Pano, because Achashveirosh, in fact, was nisgalgal in the time of Rabbi Yochanan ben Tairasa. So it's amazing. You think about the irony of the Purim story. What happened to Haman? His descendants are learning in Koil Chazonish, yeah? In Bnei Banav Shel Haman, Lemden Tar B'nei Brak. Vashti, She's on a milk farm somewhere, right? Achashveirosh, he's teaching Torah. He's the Tanur of Yochanan ben Tairasa. Marav Rabbi say, let's come back to Mordechai. So Mordechai gets up in the Beis Medrash and he says, Mishnah! And everyone says, yeah, let's have Mishnah. And Mordechai says, Simcha! And everyone says, Simcha. And then he says, Yom Tov, and everyone, boo! Why didn't Klal Yisrael want to be Makabel Purim as a Yom Tov? This is so beautiful. Says Rav Hutner, not in the Pachad Yitzchak, in the Sefer Leket Rishimais. He says in the name of the Chachmei Emes, Yom Tov is beautiful, Yom Tov is so enjoyable, there's nothing more we love more than Yom Tov. But there's one problem. If you have a Yom Tov, you have to make Havdalah. And Klal Yisrael is so connected to Purim and so attached to Purim, and they love Purim so much that they can't bring themselves to be mavdil from Purim. So they didn't want to be Makabel Purim as a Yom Tov because they never want to separate from Purim. By the way, there's another idea that we don't make Havdalah on Purim because we know in what bracha Shemona Esrei do we make Havdalah? In Chonein Hadas, right? Because in Das Havdalah Minayin, but on Purim it's Adolah Yoda, so you can't make Havdalah, right? That's what the Imrei Emes says. But the Rav Hutner says very beautifully that the reason why Klal Yisrael were never Makabel Purim as a Yom Tov is because they didn't want to be Mavdil from Purim. Analogous to the idea, remember the Rashi in Chayei Sarah? It says that when Yitzchak took Rivka, Vayivieha ha'oihala Sarah imai, that the three things that Sarah was Zoicha to, Rivka was also Zoicha to. And what were they? That when Rivka was alive, the ner was daluk from Erev Shabbos to Erev Shabbos. And the bread always stayed fresh. And the anan was over the tent. And the Avnei Nezer, the Heilige Avnei Nezer, one second, what's today? What's today's date? Ches. Avnei Nezer's yard site is Yud Aleph Adar, along with the Chida. Okay, so we're coming up with the yard site of the Heilige Sachat Shavu Rebbe. The Avnei Nezer says that the reason, what's the pshat that Sarah's candle always remained lit? What's the meaning of that? What's the pshat that her bread always stayed fresh? The meaning is that she was such a tzaddikas and so connected to Shabbos that the kedusha of Shabbos and the aura of Shabbos extended through the entire week. That's why her Shabbos candles were always burning. In fact, an amazing thing, there's the author of the Sefer Im Habanim Smecha, Rabbi Sachar Shloima Teichtal, also wrote Shal Sechuvas. He wrote Shal Sechuvas Mishnah Sacher. So in the Mishnah Sacher, there's a haskama there from Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. And Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, we know the Minhag Yisrael is that women do not drink from Havdalah. Let's say it's make Havdalah, your wife's thirsty, your daughter's thirsty, the minhag is they don't drink Havdalah. Now, some people take it too far. Let's say for whatever reason, the husband made Havdalah and the woman didn't hear Havdalah yet. So she needs to make her own Havdalah. But the minhag is you don't drink. Yeah, but the Doiraisa, or at least the Rabbana, is that they make Havdalah. So you can't get carried away. It's a minhag, but if she needs to make Havdalah, she makes Havdalah. What's the inyan that a woman doesn't drink Havdalah? Says Rabbi Sachar Shlomo Teichtal. The inyan is that like Sarah Yimenu, who had a connection to Kedusha Shabbos the whole week, women are so davuk to Shabbos, women are so connected to Shabbos, they can't bring themselves to be mavdil from Shabbos. So they refrain from drinking the yayin of Havdalah because they feel connected to Shabbos the whole week. Okay, but we are so connected to Purim that Klal Yisrael never wanted to be Makabel Purim as a Yom Tov because we can't bring ourselves to separate from Purim. So we want to suggest as follows. Comes the Matzai Shabbos, and it's a depressing time. We just had a day of Kedusha v'Tahara, a day of Limud Torah. In fact, we once spoke about the fact that in one Chazal it says if Klal Yisrael would keep one Shabbos, the Gula would come. In another Chazal it says that if Klal Yisrael would keep two Shabbos, the Gula would come. And the Sefer Ksava HaKabbalah writes that every Shabbos has in it two Shabbosos. There are two aspects of Shabbos. One aspect is not doing malacha. The other aspect is Limud Torah. Meaning if a person just sleeps the whole Shabbos, but they didn't positively connect to Limud Torah in a way they were not Shomer Shabbos. So Shabbos is such a day of Kedusha, and you have the Neshama Yisera, and then Shabbos is over, and it's a major downer that we have to be Mavdil from Shabbos. So you know what? Chazal, Anshe Knesset Gdoila, B'Roiv Chachmasam, they want to be Menachem us. So they say like this, even though a Yid has to be Mavdil from Shabbos, there's one day a year that you never have to be Mavdil from. What day is that? Purim! So therefore in every Havdalah we say La Yehudim Haisa Ayra V'Simcha V'Sasa Mikar, and we pick up that Hadas, it's a remes to Esther, and we pick up the Besamim, it's a remes to Mordechai, and we have the two Neiros, which are the two Tzaddikim Esther and Mordechai. And what we're saying is, even though a Yid has to be Mavdil from Shabbos, but as they say, Agan Seyar Purim, the whole year a Jew could feel connected to Purim, and the connection to Purim is a nechama as we take leave of Shabbos, and we remember that Purim was never accepted as a Yom Tov because we never have to be Mavdil from the Yom Tov of Purim.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.